Welcome to 3 Books with Neil Pasricha, where each episode we uncover the 3 most formative books of an inspiring individual. Hey everybody, this is Neil Pasricha, and welcome back to chapter 152 of 3 Books. You are listening to the only podcast in the world by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians. We are having a long-term hangout here, a 22-year long hangout, right? Because on every single new moon and every single full moon, we drop a conversation with somebody about the 3 most formative books in their life. We've done that since 2018. We're doing it all the way up to 2040. I was in my 30s when I started this project. I will be in my 60s when it's done. It is a worldwide hang. It is for people who want to read more. It's for people that are like, I need a good book. Where should I turn to? I don't want to get my feeds and I want to get tips from the Amazon recommendation engine or the piles in the front of the bookstore. I mean, that stuff's great, but you know what? We want to plumb the archives of our collective human minds here. We want to talk about the 3 most formative books in the world for each person. 3 most formative books for each person, 333 people. That should be 1,000 formative books total. That is our goal on the show. Now let's kick off the conversation. You can always forward over to the conversation itself. No problem if you want to jump ahead. I do that too. But there are no ads and no interruptions on the show. So it's just going to be me and you and our community of 3 bookers hanging out. So let's start off as we always do with a letter. This chapter's letter, before we jump into Robin Sloan, who I'm very excited to have here. This chapter's letter comes from Haya McKinley. Haya writes, "Hi, Neil. I just finished listening to chapter 150 with the great Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, and I want to write you to tell you how much I enjoyed it. I didn't know that much about Jean Chrétien until recently. I came to Canada as a teenager in 1997 and wasn't paying much attention to politics. Last year, when my family and our friends took our annual summer road trip to the mountain biking areas of Quebec, we decided to spend a few nights in Shawinigan to check out some of their MTB trails, mountain bike trails. On our way, I was reading up on Shawinigan, and that is when I learned that the Prime Minister was from there. I learned about his childhood, of being Rouge in the Great Sioux of Bleus, the Shawinigan Strangler story, and many other anecdotes from his long, interesting, and meaningful life. Though we didn't make it to the Jean Chrétien Museum, maybe we'll go next time. His spirit captured me, and I joined the Jean Chrétien fan club for life. My riding of Burlington, Ontario, was one of Mr. Chrétien's many stops on the most recent federal election, where he joined MP Karina Gould, also awesome, on her campaign. How cool was it to see that at 91, he's still out there making a difference in the world? I loved listening to chapter 150. What an incredible privilege and honor to have a candid conversation with such an iconic Canadian. I had to pause the audio on my walk every minute or two to make a note of a great quote to write down in my commonplace book. I ended with 17 lines and probably need to check your transcript to see if there are any more I missed. I just finished reading the recent book, The Correspondent, highly recommend it, and it has inspired me to write more letters. Thank you for all the work you do on 3 Books for book lovers and readers. I've discovered so many amazing folks from listening, like Lewis Mallard, Ginny Urich, Vishwas Agrawal, and many others. Best, Haya, Haya. Haya, back to Haya. Haya, thank you so much for the letter. As always, if I read your letter on the air, I owe you a book. So just go to neil.blog/books. Pick any book you like. I have a stack in my basement. My wife is very eager to see that stack shrink over time. Tell me which book you want. I will sign one, personalize it, and mail it out to you when I get your address. I love that letter for a lot of reasons. It was a real privilege and honor to interview Jean Chrétien. And thank you so much for shouting out a number of other guests as well, like Vishwas Agrawal way back in chapter 7. If you want to drop me a letter, please do. My email address is neil@globalhappiness.org. That's NEIL at globalhappiness, globalhappiness.org. Drop me a line anytime with a reflection, comment, criticism, whatever. I've read the critical letters once in a while. It's nice to get some criticism in there. Things you could do better, things you could do differently. Always good to hear from you 3 bookers. Thanks so much. Drop me a line anytime. And now let's get into the background on our wonderful, mind-expanding, super genius, super nerdy guest today. How did it start? Well, I got a text one night from Michael Bungay Stanier. He's the author of The Coaching Habit and a number of other books. And it was our guest back in chapter 48, where I interviewed him at his home on the front porch of his house. Or at the beginning of the conversation, I still remember our car was tearing up the wrong way on a one-way street. Anyway, he texted me and he said, have you read Robin Sloan's new book? Mate, it's so good. Well, I take Michael's recommendation seriously, so I picked up Robin Sloan's new book, Moonbound, and it completely blew me away. Reading this book was like riding some kind of rainbow-speckled rocket ship where I had experienced the rare combination of having no idea what was going on while also couldn't wait to find out what was happening next. The book is full of talking beavers, talking swords, strange video games, and ever-expanding worlds with wizards who maybe aren't really wizards. And the entire book is narrated by a microscopic AI-type chronicler who's been in many different lives across millenniums, but who now sits in our protagonist's left shoulder. The book felt like some kind of jacked up Star Wars meets Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, our guest in chapter 58, by the way, featuring Willy, Wonka, and Mad Hatter types with little moments of poignancy and reflection dashed in to let us see around our endlessly twisting lives together. It is a big, loud cymbal crash of a book. So after I was done, I reached out to Robin to invite him on the show. Robin Sloan is a writer, printer, and manufacturer. That is his new 3-word biography, which we will discuss in our chat. He has 3 excellent and mind-expanding novels, including, of course, Moonbound, which I mentioned, came out in 2024. Just came out in paperback, by the way. And as well, Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. I think that's his biggest and most popular book. If you go by like Goodreads reviews, and there's like just way more people have read that. That came out in 2012. That was a big New York Times bestseller. I have bought it and read it since to prepare for the chat, and it's also excellent, although very different. Still mind expanding, but starts in a bookstore, and it goes to like places of like, you know, wizards and wizardry and secret societies. It's really cool, really fun, and really like he's a genius to kind of put these things together. And can't forget Sourdough, which is a book that came out in 2017. Robin splits his time between the San Francisco Bay Area and the San Joaquin Valley of California, where he, guess what, makes California extra virgin olive oil. Yes, did you know they make olive oil in California? I admit I did not. I always pictured it coming from like Greece or Italy, but no, in olive oil, they make in olive oil in California. They make olive oil, including Robin, who actually is the miller of the olives. His wife runs the company. He runs a lot of parts of it. It's amazing. He also makes zines. He sells them on his website, and he sends out a nerdy and mind-expanding newsletter precisely every 29 and a half days. You can sign up for all that stuff at robinsloan.com. That's ROBINSLOAN.com. I highly recommend you get his newsletter. He's a really fascinating dude. So strap in as we discuss social media. By the way, Robin used to work at Twitter, interestingly, about a decade and a half ago. AI ethics, childhood obsession, books as technology, olive oil, myths, identity, and of course, the brilliant Robin Sloan's 3 most formative books. Let's flip the page into chapter 152 now. Hi, Robin.
Hi, welcome to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on 3 books.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
The occasion, of course, being the paperback release of Moonbound. I understand paperback is your preferred format.
Yeah, you know, it is. It's hard to choose favorites in the vast and glorious realm of books. But, you know, as a reader, I just think whippy, slim, tight little paperback at the paperback price point is about as ideal as it gets, particularly for a novel, I should say. I think it's the best way to read fiction.
This is one of our questions we always have in the show, but when you announced the release of it, you also talked about the cover, how they switched it from color to monochrome.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, I always think it's interesting the way covers evolve over time. Of course, when a book's been around for years and years and years, you have the opportunity to see many different designers kind of, you know, take a spin at it, which is awesome. Even in the transition from hardcover to paperback, sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's that opportunity to kind of shake things up and you know, present a fresh face to the world. And the interesting thing about book covers these days, you know, in the internet saturated 2020s, and has been widely remarked upon, is that it seems that many of them, for better and for worse, are being designed for Instagram, right? You know, an Instagrammable book cover. And not only that, but also the demands of the internet in general. You know, if you're browsing a bookstore online, or, you know, a collection of books online, the cover is this little thing. It's like this little, you know, squished icon in the corner. So the design has to read, you know, well, and kind of do the work in those situations. That does create an opportunity, I think, and the great paperback designer for Moonbound, whose name is Alex Murto, took that opportunity, which is to zig where everyone else zags. So on the paperback shelves now of all the bookstores, there's going to be this wash of color and, you know, this riot of bright, you know, warm shades and hues. And then there will be the brand new Moonbound paperback, which is basically black and white. Except, of course, like all of my books, it has a little bit of a secret, which is that when you turn the lights off, the cover glows in the dark.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
It's funny. I was out for dinner last night with Michael Bungay Stanier. He wrote the book, The Coaching Habit. He was our guest in chapter 48. He's the one that texted me originally and said, do you know Robin Sloan? Have you read Moonbound? You got to read this book. I think he'd be perfect. And he was just telling me last night that they just discovered that platypuses are iridescent, like they have the bioluminescence, and that nobody knew that they had this before.
Awesome.
And so there's another overlap. Well, I loved Moonbound. I put it in my best of 2024
awesome. That's
reads. It just really blew me away. It's so big-minded, so interesting. I wore this shirt because it was sort of my most Moonboundy.
It's Moonboundy, yeah. There's a whole universe. There's a whole like ecosystem unfolding on your shirt there. Absolutely, yeah.
I was trying. It's compliments of Dan the Tailor, who's another past guest on the show. And yeah, that's what the book did for me. It just really opened me up in a lot of different ways.
Cool.
I had a lot of opening questions for you. One, of course, was how many particles are there in the universe?
Yeah, that is a good question. 2 to the 75th. It's lower. The number I love. Of course, you're referring to the question I sort of posed or posed to myself in a recent newsletter. The thing about those big numbers physicists have got all sorts of them. They've got the number of particles in the universe, number of galaxies in the universe. They're all big numbers, but they're sort of weirdly not as big as you almost would hope they would be. You know, a physicist would be like, oh yeah, well, 10 to the 75th. Oh yeah, that's a bigger number than could fit in the entire known cosmos and 10 more. And you're like, oh man, that makes me uncomfortable for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny that you said 10 to the 75th because I did ask Claude and he said, or they said 10 to the 78th.
Okay.
So you were like off by only 3 zeros.
Not too bad. Yeah.
Very close. And I was, of course, hinting at your newsletter, which comes out every 29 and a half days.
Yeah. Or close to it. Yeah. Does 29 and a half days mean anything to you? Any ring any bells?
It's not. Well, my first instinct was it was the year divided by 12.
No, it's the phase of the moon, more or less. The cycle of the moon runs pretty close to 29 and a half days. And I really a while back, years and years ago, I did a little mini newsletter for maybe half a year, and I guess just because nothing can ever be simple, because I can never do things the normal way, I sent it on prime numbered days, 2, 3, 5, 7. And it was fun because it didn't, a lot of people obviously do things on a normal calendar. They send their newsletter on Tuesdays, or they publish their podcast, every other Thursday or whatever it is. And more power to them. But I find that sort of, frankly, unpredictable and more organic pace weirdly fun, and it's almost like a game you play, with yourself and with the calendar.
Yeah.
So yeah, the 29 and a half days.
I would have known that, considering this podcast comes out on the full moons.
We're gonna stack up all of our sort of cosmic factoids in this conversation: the number of particles of the universe, the length of the phase of the moon. Yeah.
Well, this lends it, for three bookers, this is what we do. We drop a new chapter on the exact minute of every single full moon. And it was new moon, but now I'm doing classics on the new moon. So I have like a little bit more of a safe thing, but I never actually put it into a day calculation for it to ring a bell for me. Yeah. I just I go to timeanddate.com. I look up the moon schedules, and I just go precisely on that, which has been terrible for Apple podcast algorithm. When I first came out with this podcast, it was like, it I was releasing podcasts, Tuesday at 3:38 a.m.
I think that's fantastic. I so support that. It's great.
Okay.
It's great. Yeah, we're working on deeper calendars here.
Exactly. Now I was listening to a podcast called The Difference, which you were on in March 2025, and they called you novelist, olive oil entrepreneur, AI experimenter, and musician. And then, as if on cue, leading up to this conversation in 2025, you changed your bio online.
Yeah.
So tell me about the change, what you now identify yourself as.
Yeah, right.
Why.
Boy, isn't that the kind of the meta observation I think is interesting, which is that like in ages past, there wasn't maybe quite as wide a latitude to describe yourself, and what you do or what you think of yourself as. More often people were described, it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to wait for somebody to write about me in a newspaper or magazine, and I'll hope they say what I want them to say, what I wish they'd say. But it wasn't really up to you. And now in the era of people being able to sort of hang their own shingle out online, and that could be a website. That's mostly the case with me. For me, my home is really my own personal website. But it could also be a social media profile, right? There's always that little space, that little bio where you cram in a few words. And it's just interesting that it kind of, to me, those words that you put into those spaces are descriptions, but I think they can also be aspirations, and they have been for me historically. I remember very, very vividly with almost a sensory clarity, like where I was and also how I was feeling years and years ago when I changed my Twitter bio back in the days when Twitter was really, really the place to be, to include the word writer. And that's weird to remember now because that's been such a part of my life and a part of my working life for so long. But there was a moment where I was like, oh boy, I'm not really a writer yet, but I want to be, and I hope nobody makes fun of me. Of course, nobody did, because nobody else cares, really, except for you. So yeah, that's all to say. I did. I after just being, Robin Sloan, a writer for really a long time.
So when did you change it on Twitter? That would have been Twitter that also.
That was 2008, I think.
2008, and you worked for Twitter the year after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wasn't even a Twitter employee yet. That's how cool Twitter was. At that time I cared about my bio on the website, and then I went to work for the company. But then quickly discovered that I was not cut out to work in a tech office. The new description, it's writer's still part of it, but for years now I've been spending a lot more time making things, and that includes making olive oil. It includes printing, and I found just a real kind of both practical satisfaction and frankly some real creative energy in kind of going beyond just making the words and handing them off to someone else. So yeah, the new self-definition, which does have a bit of aspiration in it, is Robin Sloan, a writer, printer, and manufacturer, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with that as a vision.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Writer, of course, we know you as the novelist behind Moonbound, Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore, Sourdough, and printer because you produce zines.
Yeah.
And meaning that you actually write them, print them, mail them.
Yep.
The whole
deal. Exactly. Yeah. Creation, production, and distribution. I guess I do everything except carry it to people's front door.
Okay, and then and then manufacturer, that's the olive oil.
Yeah, that's the olive oil, and I guess I would say it also, in a way, I almost want to insist that printing and publishing are sort of cousins to manufacturing. It's easy to overlook the technology, really, the still really profound technology involved in every step of the printing, publishing, book making process. This is kind of, I think, familiar terrain for readers of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. But books now are so familiar and so, cozy that I think we often forget, or it's just easy to sort of overlook the deeply kind of technical and technological aspect. The printed book is a technology, and I could go on and argue about how it's like kind of a more reliable technology than the computers we're talking on right now. But it's just to say manufacture is my way of saying like we're doing some real industry here. This is not just arts and crafts.
Right, absolutely. And by the way, I did order Fat Gold to my assistant who lives in New York because I'm in Canada, and of course it was.
Yeah, I know. Such a great disappointment that we can't ship up there yet.
Yeah, but she reports it was delicious.
Awesome.
She's a real foodie, and then so thank you.
Good.
Fat gold olive oil made in California.
That's right. Made by yours truly. Somebody could have a real 360 experience if they sat down to read Moonbound while perhaps drizzling their salad with some fat gold, which I operate the olive mill during the harvest season, so they could just have a real Robin Sloan evening. Sounds like they either won or lost a contest if they do that.
No, I think it sounds delicious and for every sense. I want to kind of park the olive oil because I have a couple questions about that, but I'll save them for a little bit. Great. But on the bio thing, you just mentioned, you kind of enter, you hang out mostly online, but mostly on your website, robinsloan.com. You have this wonderful 29.5-day newsletter, which I subscribe to. I love, I recommend. And then you also mentioned you could put it on social media. And then when I go on your Instagram, you only have 3 posts total.
Yeah.
And you even have a little note there saying, I post frequently to stories but rarely to the grid.
Yeah.
Why is that? So I went and checked your Instagram stories. It's like, the Fear a Lot report.
Yeah. It's
literally the only holiday I recognize, and you're like zooming on, like,
it's very niche. Yeah, it's very my stories are the definition of niche, I think, or cult is, that you have few but intense fans and aficionados, and not very many people look at my Instagram stories, but I do think I have turned the feral, overgrown lot in my neighborhood into like a mini micro celebrity in a certain community, which I'm very proud of.
I think that's great. But what was the reason for not posting to the grid? I thought it was something to do with your suspicions or something.
No. It's honestly, I don't think this is uncommon. I like a lot of people have been historically early to a lot of these platforms. Again, I was here in the Bay Area in the mid 2000s and onward, and all this stuff was appearing, and it was literally bubbling up out of right here. The people who made Twitter and these other platforms that are now defunct and Instagram, they were all either people that I had encountered or knew, or friends of mine knew them, and you'd kind of be walking around the neighborhood and someone would point and say, "Oh, that's that office of that new thing called Twitter." So it's all very like present and frankly felt pretty cool and exciting at that time. It was really a different time before this stuff had grown and, I don't know, kind of darkened into its present form. It was also frankly time before the iPhone, which is a weird thing to recall, but our relationship to these platforms and how we use them was really, really different when they didn't follow us around everywhere we went in the world. So that's all to say, time has passed. I've spent a lot of years on timeline-based algorithmic social media platforms. And several years ago, this is actually not a recent thing for me, but it's at this point pretty well established. I just realized I had burned out on the experience. I personally wasn't getting much out of it, either personally or really professionally, to be candid. I mean, it's not like this was doing much for me in terms of finding readers or selling books or anything like that. And I didn't like the companies running these platforms either. So because I was like, don't like doing it.
Yeah.
Don't like the people who are making it or their values or their objectives. So maybe I'm going to kind of scale this back. I'm not a complete abstainer, and I'm certainly not evangelical about it. I think if people want to use these platforms, more power to them. But for me, it's just not a big part of my life.
Was there a note? Could you point to a part of anywhere in time when it went from exciting and local to a value, kind of conflicting values?
That's a good question. It was for me. I think some people did have, there's a lot of stories kind of breaking points, right? Or these like sharp ruptures. That really wasn't the case for me. It was more of a slow crossfade. And I think it's amazing to consider that people have been using these platforms for this long. But as I recognized that I had been using a lot of this stuff for about 10 years, give or take. So this is kind of, a little about 10 years ago, or maybe a little under 10 years ago. I kind of went like, am I just going to do this for another 10 years? And 10 years after that, and that thought did not fill me with excitement and optimism. If I think about other activities going on for decades, like writing books, publishing books, zines, you name it, I'm like, yeah, oh man, I should be so lucky. But when it came to Twitter, and when it came to, building up a big library of weird old images on Instagram, I kind of went, oh, I think maybe I've had enough. So
it was the novelty wearing off thing, as opposed to you sort of sensing that what they were prioritizing and what they were doing to society was like.
Oh no, it's both. No, it's both. It's
okay.
It's. I would say, if they were different organizations, run a different way with different objectives, and in some imagine some fantasy world where this is like something out of Moonbound. It's so fantastical. Imagine that Twitter, instead of being bought by a industrialist super billionaire, had been converted into a great worker-owned tech cooperative, and they said, we're going to try to make Twitter into a truly public space and a healthy platform, and this just like wonderful ecosystem for conversation. Now, I actually think I probably might still not be on Twitter because I just am not interested in like posting on the timeline anymore. I will say that would be a much more interesting alternative. It'd be a much more live question than the current reality.
Absolutely. And that was always the sort of fabled future kind of vision for it at the beginning.
Yeah. There were utopia. I mean, again, you don't want to. It's easy to feel like quite naive, and maybe I should, and maybe a lot of people who were around at that time in San Francisco should. But there were some real utopian visions for the web. Some real, I think very lovely dreams in that kind of, call it 2005 to 2010, 2012 era. It was of course, it had followed the great .com bust. This previous bubble that was just off the charts.
Yeah.
And as is often the case, sometimes those busts and the disappointments, the way the money all kind of runs away, it's almost like the tide going out, and suddenly like there's like new spaces and new opportunities. It was a cool time. It was a cool and fertile time in this area.
Well, speaking of lovely visions and mythological dreams,
Yeah.
It's a nice transition into your first of 3 formative books you've been kind enough to share with us. I wouldn't mind taking just quick 30 seconds to introduce this book to our listeners. Then I'll ask you to tell us about your relationship with it. Why don't we begin with D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths?
D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths. There is, of course, also a D'Aulaire's Book of Norse Myths, which is very good as well. But it doesn't have the same umami as the Greek compendium. So this is a book notionally for children, always published in large format. It's just a big, armful of a book, and it was written and illustrated by this married couple, the D'Aulaires. Years ago. I mean, I think
Laire.
Yeah, and I don't know that I even could tell you the publication date off the top of my head, other than that it is definitely before the 80s. Maybe it's a book
Random House Children's Books, 1962.
There you go, 62. Boy, God, that's great. So
do you want me to just say a couple quick things about it for listeners?
Sure. Yeah,
go ahead. Picture them holding it in a bookstore. So you're picking it up in a bookstore. It's like, as Robin said, it's like, it got to be 8 inches wide by 12 inches tall. It's a big book, kind of the size and shape of like a big design magazine. Dark blue cover with the title in gold Greek style font. Below the title is a drawing of a person riding in a chariot drawn by 4 white horses. They are stylized gold borders adorning the top and the bottom with small gold silhouettes containing centaur and minotaur type of figures across the bottom. Ingri and Edgar Parin D'Aulaire, were a married couple who met in art school in Munich in 1921. Born in the 1800s, they came to America and were successful artists. They won the Caldecott for a book called Abraham Lincoln, actually. Edgar illustrated the books, Ingrid painted portraits. They were considered some of the very first picture book artists ever. What is the book? It is a children's/middle grade collection of ancient Greek and Roman myth narratives with lyrical prose and whimsical illustrations. Dewey Decimal Heads, please file this under 398.21 for social sciences/folklore/tales and lore of paranatural beings of human and semi-human form.
Semi-human.
That is the filing.
That's
Robin,
great.
please tell us about your relationship with D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths by Edgar Parin d'Aulaire and Ingri Parin d'Aulaire.
So, it begins in elementary school. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit called Troy. And my little elementary school was a short, but not too short walk from my house. I would kind of walk down the sidewalk and then go down this path that went over a bridge across a creek with this kind of in this overgrown sort of semi-wild area. Maybe that's where I got my taste for feral urban spaces, because I kind of passed through one every day of my young life. And there in this elementary school, we had a really, really nice library kind of in a central area in the school. And of course, once a week, our teacher, every year that I was in school there would march us down to the library to return a book, check out a book, whatever. I believe it was third grade. I could be wrong, of course, because it kind of all smushes together, but I think that's right. It was in third grade when I discovered D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths on the shelf.
So we're talking like late 80s time?
Yeah. Yeah. When is it? That's right. That's about right. Late 80s. Woe unto any of my classmates that year that also might have been interested in checking out that book, because it was not available. I would take it dutifully back, to school, back to the library on library day, and then just present it again to the librarian and be like, I'll take this one again. I did that of course, it's, again, who knows, memory is a little unreliable. In my memory, I literally did that all year. I don't think that's really the case. I think maybe it was for a couple months or something like that. But the point is, I kept that book, and I have these memories of like laying, because it's such a big, beautiful book. So you kind of lay on your belly, on the carpet, and the book's open. And I was looking at it so intensely, I almost like it felt like my gaze might like etch something in the page, or produce heat there on the page. It was if the dictionary definition of captivation, of readerly captivation, I loved it. I read it. I reread it. I looked at the beautiful, weird, interesting illustrations. They're small, they're large, they're kind of interspersed in the text. Some are monochrome, some are color, and I just had a ball. So I never forgot about it ever since. Of course, shortly after that, we did get our own copy at home, and I read it for years and years after that. And then I will say that the kind of the cherry on top, the thing that really sort of has sealed D'Aulaire's position in my cosmology is that as after I kind of grew up and started my adult life, every so often I would meet somebody who, I don't know, I just brought it up randomly, I would just mention it, and the response was not like, oh yeah, I read that. Instead, it was like, $. I mean, there's a cult. There's a cult of us out there. In fact, I guarantee there's some folks listening to this podcast who, when at the moment you first mentioned it, they might have leapt up out of their chair and said, $. There's a lot of books, a lot of kids' books that people love. I think there is and has been something really special and deep about this book, the way it has captured and molded the attention and imagination of a certain kind of kid. So it's been fun to meet my fellow cultists.
Yeah. And what a formative book so early in your child experience. I love the image of you checking it out over and over again.
Yeah.
Of course, the book has the word myth in the cover, and thinking about today with where we are in life, I really loved and enjoyed your long form essay that you wrote on AI earlier this year called Is It Okay? And I want to quote back to you a couple pieces for near the end of that quote. Of course, it doesn't do justice to the full piece, which I will share in the show notes as well. But talking about AI, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the mythology of AI and sort of where we are today and what your views are. To answer that question in the title, you said, if their primary application, speaking of the LLMs or the large language models, is to produce writing and other media that crowds out human composition, human production, no, it's not okay. You also say, if an AI application delivers some profound public good, or even if it might, it probably is okay that its value is rooted in this unprecedented opera.
I know, that word, I literally have never been able to say that word out loud straight. Why did I use the word operationalization?
That's me.
No. It was brutal. It was a brutal choice.
Of the common. So you are openly wrestling with the idea of what is happening in AI right now. Is it okay or not? And of course, by whenever this podcast is released, it will become outdated because everything's changing so fast. But you have a profound insight and a very close feel and grasp of this universe. I'd really love you to share your thoughts with everybody here. Where are you today on the ethical side of AI?
Yeah. I mean, the ethical question, it's like the ethical questions. There's many of them overlapping. For me, especially given my interests, and these are interests that predate, all of this AI stuff. They have to do with the commons, with the things, the artistic and cultural creations that people share. And I think you're right to connect myths to that, because like, what is a book of like D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths if not this genius couple who went digging in the shared toy box of humanity, picked up some of the classics and said, "Oh, we want to play with these toys." And then they did, and they retold those stories, but of course every retelling brings something new, so in a way they're carrying them forward to like new generations, literally, to me. Now I've become someone who also is in different ways and in different different pieces of work, a myth reteller, and I'm playing with toys myself. So deep interest, and I think that connects very, very directly to one of the huge questions, and really the central question of my essay, and that the big is it okay? Is this even like permissible? Is this something we can contemplate? And it has to do with the fact that every one of these large language models, regardless of the particular technology behind them, the kind of the math and the code underpinning them, regardless of the status of the organization that has put them together, regardless of the cost, at which they're offered to the world, they share one thing in common, which is that they are trained, grown. I really think that like the analogy of growth, almost organic growth, like a rose bush growing on a trellis is really not only kind of artful and appealing, but actually very technically accurate. When they do that growing, the sunlight they're responding to, the force that's guiding that shape, is that commons. It's this incredible shared body of work. Of course, it's not only the Greek myths and not only, books and stories and poems. It's like weird web pages about like, agricultural equipment and, stock markets, and people's posts about, how they fixed their power outlets in their house and everything else. I mean, it's actually an basically unfathomable amount of text and writing and human expression. But the point is, it is human expression. It's this huge shared cultural
You call
commons.
it everything in the
Call
essay.
it everything, yeah. It really, and it's not. That's it's like everything asterisk, because of course there's actually a lot and a lot of really important stuff that's not online and never has been. By the way, the AI companies are like working really hard to get their hands on it now and to digitize it, because that's like, it's almost their fossil fuel. And I think that's another analogy that's both kind of appealing and also technically correct. There's this resource that was built up over time, and the only way to kind of amass it was with the passing of time, and now they're tapping into the energy, the latent energy sort of stored in there. So anyways, that's just all to say. That's a big wind up to say, I think anybody, particularly folks who feel kind of invested in the idea of like the public domain, a cultural commons, the shared, sort of written inheritance of humanity, ought to kind of consider how these things are being used and say like, I mean, do we agree as people invested in the commons that that's like an okay use of this material to kind of fold it into these machines, which then are able to do really impressive and valuable tasks, and then charge people for those tasks? I think reasonable people can answer yes, it's totally fine. I'm kind of on like, as you quoted from the essay, I'm kind of on like, it depends. It depends what the output is. It might be okay in other cases. In other cases, I think it's quite offensive, actually.
Yeah. you really kind of predicted some of this, right? And so, because I think Mr. Penumbra came out in 2011.
2012.
Right? And on page 86, just to read you a quote from your own book, books, Raj pauses a moment, chewing. Then his brain slots into a groove. Old books are a big problem for us. Old knowledge in general. We call it okay. Old knowledge. Okay. Did you know that 95% of the internet was only created in the last 5 years? But we know that when it comes to all human knowledge, the ratio is just the opposite. In fact, okay accounts for most things that most people know and have ever known. That was like 12, 13 years ago. So and that was a conversation that takes place in the Google cafeteria.
Yeah, right.
And my big worry is that, you wrote this essay from your own brain with your own fingers on your own blog, and this endless recursive nature. Like, I was asking ChatGPT something yesterday, and it quoted my own blog back to me. Like, my own blog was the source right in the label.
Amazing.
And I thought, well, if it's quoting my own blog back to me, well, then, it's an endlessly recursive thing. It's like a homogenization of everyone's thoughts. And of course, I go really far out of my way to not use AI to come up with my podcast questions just because I want them to be coming from me. Yeah. But I don't know how long I can last.
I think you can hold out. It does. You gotta care. I really think we're starting to see a sort of bifurcation. There's, it's not the only one, but it's an important kind of cleavage in the world, and the set of tasks and people, doing work. And on one hand, there's, the people who care about what they're doing, and they want it to be at the highest possible level, the best they can do. They want it to, as you say, they want it to reflect their own, real specific personality and viewpoint on the world. And then there's, I don't know, a set of tasks, a set of people, maybe it's a set of companies and managers who are like, I don't really care, just do something. And AI slop is kind of good enough. And there's always been a difference in the world between the good enough universe and the, I don't know, call it the we really care universe, the artisanal universe, the world class workers of the world. And I think this just sharpens that distinction. And I think if a person feels like they want to be in the world that cares, I do think it's really important to hold the line and take that responsibility really seriously.
Wow, be in the world that cares. I love that. Okay, next question on this topic. So obviously this book is written by husband and wife, a husband and wife team. On the Fat Gold olive oil page, Catherine Tomajian. I don't know if I said her.
Tomajian. Yeah, it's a little tricky. Yeah, Catherine Tomajian
has an incredible bio. An olive oil maker, taster, educator with a master's degree in food culture from the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Palenzo, Italy. Her thesis explored the opportunities and challenges of New World olive oil in Australia, New Zealand, and California. Of course, you're listed on the bio page right below as our apprentice miller and communications chief.
Yeah.
So my question was really around, how do you work well with your wife?
Yeah. For us, it's a good question. For us, it has been such a boon and just a wonderful shared project. It truly to have something that we, and of course it, started small. It was not always, it was neither our design nor our, we didn't imagine that this thing that we work on together very closely would grow to become really a big part of our professional lives and economic lives and everything else. It just started as kind of a
how big is it?
It's big. It's for us. It's a super successful small olive oil producer. Where before it was writing and publishing books that accounted for most of my income. Now it's pretty evenly shared with Fat Gold, which is great. It's super, it's thriving. Not shipping to Canada yet, though. I wish
we're ready for it. I know that the tariffs are coming down. So
I hope they do. We actually, in all sincerity, we were all set to go. We finally figured this out, and it was literally the month before the entire universe of global trade was sort of upended, and it was like pressing reset on your Nintendo. You're like, oh my, I was doing so well at Super Mario Brothers. You gotta start over.
Metaphor.
Yeah. So anyways, so that's all to say. Having the shared project has been great. We're our temperaments are very compatible. And I will add that the division of labor, I mean, this is true for any partnership, any professional partnership, not just one where you happen to be married to the other person. I think the division of labor and this real sense of sort of complementary strengths is just so great, and so it can be so effective and also like quite fun, because there's always this set of tasks that like one person finds just disgusting. I mean, just like, oh God, for example, to make it concrete, mine would be something like bookkeeping. The idea of going through receipts in any part of my life, I'm like, oh God. Oh, I don't know, round it up or round it down. So Catherine has no problem with that. She handles it with precision and aplomb. Conversely, I do all of our marketing. I write the emails. I manage the website. I write and print these zines that we pack with every order that we send. And that's not something that Catherine would be excited to do. She's done that in other jobs before, and for her, it was always it was grind. She was like, I can do it. I can do it to a very high degree of quality, but this is not what I would choose to do with my, Thursday afternoon. Whereas Catherine's actually accused me. She has said, looking at something I'm writing for Fat Gold, maybe a little more substantial than it needs to be. And she'll say, you really will find a way to turn anything into a publishing project, won't you?
Oh, that's so funny.
And I'm forced to confess that's probably true.
Yeah, which is to all we love it, but yeah, I can see why not everybody would, and I can relate to that completely. Out of curiosity, just because I know so little about food culture globally, are there some macro food trends happening? I mean, this New World olive oil seemed to be an interesting thing, but when you and she are talking, you must have some visibility to some macro level trends globally that the rest of us can't see.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge question. Of course, there's some huge mega trends. I mean, one of them is, this is probably a little more obvious, but the idea that sort of global trade is going to never quite be the same is really big and really important for food production, because food production, for better for worse, is fully globalized. I mean, it's just stuff is coming from all over and going everywhere. That's thanks really in large part to this incredible technological, triumph that is the cold chain. You go back even 50 years, 60 years, and it was not possible to transfer a pork chop from America to China and back. Yeah. You're like, you can't do that, and now you totally can, and people do. So, although maybe not for much longer, maybe that's gonna change. But that's just to say that creates all sorts of new costs, but also new opportunities for all sorts of folks, and that is, I would say, at this moment, accounts for the great majority of what people are talking about. I do think this is a little, aspirational on my part. It's my observation, but it's also my hope. I do think that a recognition that, I mean, it really is as simple as this. Like, there's been a lot of food for a lot of years now that has a list of ingredients on the side, and you're like, what are all those long, strange words? And that's just been, kind of the normal culture of food, particularly, in the United States and at the supermarket. It's just it's a bunch of weird stuff in boxes and, in the freezer case.
Everything in a 7-Eleven.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh yeah. Those are some long chemical names on the side of the 7-Eleven wrapper. And that's obviously not going to change overnight, but I really do believe that more and more people are kind of waking up to the reality that, like, one of the best changes you can make both for yourself in terms of your health and frankly your enjoyment of food, and also for like your community and your ecosystem, is to sort of insist on eating foods that you recognize the ingredients of, that are like, yes, flour, salt. I know what those things are. And that sounds simple. It sounds simplistic. And I think for some people, including, I suspect, many listening to this podcast, they'll be like, yeah, no kidding, been there a long time. But the truth is, there's a lot of people out there eating a lot of different stuff. And I think that wave of kind of awareness, and in a way, it's going back in time. It's kind of unwinding some of the weird machinations of the very industrial 20th century. And I think in this particular case, a sort of turning back the clock to a simpler approach is actually just a better thing for everybody, and certainly for the whole planet.
I hope you're right. I like how you called it aspirational.
Yeah.
So let's transition now. Thank you for opening that up. Thank you for talking about your partner. Thank you for talking about the Fat Gold Company. Thank you for talking about your current views on AI, which we maybe poke at a little bit deeper in a moment. But The Player of Game is by Iain M. Banks. I want to hold this up. Published in 1989 by Little Brown Group. The cover, there's different covers. The most famous one actually is a blurry photo of a man's silhouette on a set of stairs. He stands obscured with his arms folded, looking at the reader. Cover comes in varying shades of blue with the author's name standing out. I happen to have a black and yellow kind of speckled cover.
That's the new, that they kind of gave them all a new coat of paint. That's nice.
I know, right? Yeah. Iain Banks, by the way, Scottish sci-fi writer who died in 2013 at the age of 29. What is this book about? I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Jamal Morat Gurgay, a skilled player of various games, is recruited by the Culture's Contact Division to participate in an alien game called Azad. Azad is not just a game, but a high-stakes political contest that determines the social hierarchy of the alien empire of Azad. File this one, Dewey Decimal Heads under 823.08762 for literature / Old English literature / adventure fiction / speculative fiction / science fiction. Robin, tell us about your relationship with The Player of Game.
Yeah, I will. For the record, Iain M. Banks died. He was in his 50s. He wasn't 29, but still.
Oh, sorry. I thought I said 59.
Incredibly, way too young. It's one. I mean, no shortage of tragic stories like that, but he was just way too young to the thought that he except for the roll of the dice and some real bad luck, he would still be here writing more culture novels is just almost too much to bear. So let me situate Player Games just slightly in a slightly larger context, and then I'll talk about the book in particular. So Iain M. Banks, prolific author, wrote a lot in many genres. The genre that I'm most familiar with and the books of his that have meant so much to me are his science fiction books, which are interesting because they take place in a shared universe with sort of a shared history, and you get to know it over the course of reading many of the books. But it's not a series. I mean, it doesn't have that sort of big, large-scale unfolding story the way that, say, the Expanse books by James S.A. Corey do, or even Foundation, the Foundation series from Asimov, or there's a bunch more obviously you could choose as comparisons. So it has this odd status of being, a very developed, far future science fictional world. I mean, it is way out there. This is not merely Star Trek where we're like, oh, look, these Earthlings going out in their spaceships. No, nobody's ever heard of Earth in the culture. We're just way out there in the galaxy doing stuff tens of thousands of years from now. But it's not like you can pick up one and then book 2 and then book 3 and book 4. It's a little more of a sampling platter, when you kind of follow your nose in terms of which books you're interested in. Player of Games is the first one that I read. It was my introduction to this universe. I've now read almost all of them. In fact, I haven't actually read all of them because a couple I just thought were pretty bad and pretty boring. I've read almost all of them, but Player of Games was my first, and it is still my favorite. Because it is, first of all, I think a very useful, practical, and sort of seductive introduction to the culture, to this creation, this imaginative creation of Iain M. Banks's. And also, it's a story basically about games. And there's other, novels about games or stories that have games at their heart, and if there's a name for that subgenre, whatever it is, I think it's a really good one. Games are fun, they're interesting, they're kind of weird to think about. I think they bring out a lot of the best in thinkers, actually. We see this with economists and physicists in the 20th century. It's weird, actually, how many of these people, these brilliant thinkers, were like low-key obsessed with all sorts of games, and kind of as much as they thought about like protons or computers or black holes, they like thought about games, and the interactions of these games and the complexities that could emerge out of the simple rules of the games became really, really rich and really instructive for all these people. So Player of Games has at its heart this super weird game. I'm not even going to try to characterize it because it's weird and cool and wild. I mean, it's a game kind of big enough to obsess an entire civilization in this story. But it's cool. It's a great thing to read about. And the main thing to wrap up my initial response, the thing that has meant so much to me about the thing about Iain M. Banks and the culture that has meant so much to me is that I love science fiction, and having read a lot of it at this point, I now believe that there is science fiction and there is science fiction. And the latter kind just goes bigger in terms of the scope, in terms of both time and space. It considers more. That bigger, more muscular, more wildly imaginative science fiction is like not satisfied with like the solar system, Earth and Mars and Jupiter. It's got to go to like the boundaries of the cosmos and maybe to the end of time in the universe.
Yeah.
Another example, just to kind of frame it up, another example of a book and a series that play in culture level scale is the series that begins with the 3-body problem. It's big stuff. And I find that as a writer, I find that really inspiring. It's in some ways quite challenging. It's a implicit challenge. Like, hey, can you imagine something this big? And the answer is usually no, not quite, not yet. It's really just it's an almost athletic feat to observe on the page.
Wow, that's a great way to describe it. So the phrase that I had written down, but you didn't mention, but maybe it's the same thing, is world creation.
Sure.
And so I was picturing this phrase, world creation, creating a world, and you do this, of course.
Yeah.
In your writing so well. I love that. I think it's Cory Doctorow review of Moonbound, where he says like, this is quite a leap what you tried to pull off, and he lands it perfectly.
That's boy. And also I got to say, coming from the great Cory Doctorow, that was a meaningful assessment. It is, and I will say, I mean, to that point, and it's all actually very connected. My appreciation for Banks and for the culture is not just sort of, casual and like, oh yeah, as a reader. It is linked in deep with my writing and my aspirations for myself as a writer. As I have read more of the culture novels and thought about them more deeply, and other science fiction too, that's kind of operates on that scale, I have thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to think that big and imagine that big. Now, I am not at Banks scale yet, or 3-body problem scale. But Moonbound does represent a leap for me. It's bigger. It's much bigger than my previous 2 novels. And I'm proud. I'm proud of the way I kind of have pushed it out.
Yeah, and thank you. And a lot of people listening to this is the only podcast in the world by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians. Like that's our audience.
Literally, there's all the best people in the world.
All the best people in the world. And so I was curious, because you do this, you're inspired by it, it's formative to you. If you were, I've only encountered that kind of richness myself. I'm like maybe a junior reader, but like in like books like Lord of the Rings or Cloud Atlas. And so if you were teaching a master's in world creation at like Syracuse or Iowa Writers Workshop, what would your curriculum look like?
Oh boy, so that's a great question. Great question. So not sure of the exact list, but I can tell you it would approach it a few different ways, because there's at least, again, it's multi-dimensional, but you can imagine at least one kind of 2-dimensional or, a linear spectrum in the approach to this. Because often when people talk about world building and the creation of these, rich histories and, fantasy backdrops, they do think of Tolkien, as they should. So we would read Tolkien. And that's like one end of my spectrum, because it's explicit. And it's you can think of it as the writer who, put all this amazing detail on the page, and that was only 2% of the detail in their notes, which are stacked up in a huge, insane pile, on their desk.
Oh, really?
Which is great. We love that. I mean, that's
like all the languages he created. And so
exactly. Right. The history. And so you could ask, it seems that probably not at Tolkien level, but it seems like George R.R. Martin was also operating on that end of the spectrum. A fan could email in and the Game of Thrones and say, on the second day of this month, what was Sir Robinius doing? What color was the horse that he was riding? And George R. R. Martin would probably ask his assistant or consult the files and say, it was a brown horse, So great, incredible, impressive, and often, the results are quite captivating, right? There is another approach, and I think it's important because I think fantasy readers, fantasy fans, they often fixate on that approach. And Tolkien is just this like gravity well, just this just always kind of pulling in people's attention, people's affection and just admiration.
Literally describing every element of a new place and then writing from that.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason also people respond to it is that it seems fun to do. And it is fun to do. I mean, that's anyone who, for instance, has ever played Dungeons and Dragons, as a game master, and who's like kind of worked up a scenario and a cool quest for their friends to go through. They've done a little bit of that world building, and it's not, they haven't figured every single thing out, but they probably drew some maps and made a list of the people you might encounter, and all this cool stuff. And you realize like it's really fun. It's a fun thing to do. But it's important to say that there is a whole other approach, and I admire it just as much, and I think it's just as important. And it's what I'll call, if that end is the explicit, there's the implicit, or the sort of art, the world building of artful gaps. And there's a lot of people who do it well. There's two writers that I think of. One is Ursula K. Le Guin, particularly in her series about Earthsea that begins with a wizard of Earthsea.
Yeah.
And another
formative to David Mitchell, our guest in chapter 58. I mean,
it's one of the all-time greats. That could have easily been on my list. Another is M. John Harrison, who's a writer of mostly science fiction. I think some of the books you could just call weird and or literary. I mean, he actually is just a phenomenal prose writer, one of the best actually in any genre working today in English, just outstanding. And in particular, again, I could select from his books, but he has a little trilogy, and it begins with a book called Light. Tremendous book. And it's, we were talking before about imagination and scope. The scope of Light is big. It might not be quite culture level, but it's big, and it's about people zooming around faster than light and doing weird things with physics, and it hopscotches through time. There's sort of scenes that are set here in our time, and then suddenly you're like, poof, on the edge of a throbbing pulsar, on some strange space scene, and it's dizzying. And but this is, I think, what's so interesting. The world there feels more than rich. It feels almost psychedelic, and it's completely captivating, super cool. I mean, you kind of look around the page and go, wow, this is great. And this is M. John Harrison didn't imagine a thing except the words on the page. There's no secret guidebook. There's no stack of, drawings and maps and the names of all the planets. This is a writer who kind of just goes straight at the language and puts it down and leaves things out. I mean, sometimes there will be an omission and you kind of go, well, wait, am I supposed to know what that is or who that is? Or it'll just be someone or something that's mentioned once, and then we kind of leave them behind. And rather than being like confusing or disappointing, it's absolutely delicious. I mean, it's phenomenal. The energy that creates on the page. It's very different from the energy of the Tolkien-esque, info dump, which honestly can be plotting sometimes if you're not careful, if you don't know how to do
definitely.
it well.
I read the first one out loud last year to my oldest child, and it was like,
it's a little rough. It's a little rough, yeah. So anyways, that's I would
call it implicit and explicit.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that would,
the world is contained within the book. It's not drawing upon like a kind of a false history somewhere else.
Yeah. And also the sense that, like, in a way there's a recognition in the implicit. I think this, by the way, applies to a lot of art. And this is not just about novels. I think this applies to movies and visual art, all sorts of things. There's the recognition that it's all co-created. I mean, that's especially true for fiction. For fiction to come alive, it's words on a page don't do anything. A movie can play in an empty room, but words on a page are inert until activated by the imaginative mind of a reader. And I think the implicit world builder recognizes how much the depth of the contribution that a reader makes. and frankly leaves a little more space for that. I mean, I kind of like both ends of the spectrum, and I think there's instruments from both that are worth using. I think my heart, it's a little challenging to say because I do love Tolkien, but I think my heart is with the implicit world builders, the ones who say, like, I mean, famously, Ursula K. Le Guin, she's got these great lines at the conclusion of the first Wizard of Earthsea book. She didn't know she was going to write more in that world. And actually, no, it's at the beginning of the book. It's at the very beginning. She says, she's kind of setting it up, you know, the story we're going to hear about this character. And she says, well, this was before he had sailed the Dragon's Run or, you know, recovered the ring of Erith Akbi. And then it goes on and says some more stuff. And then the kind of story begins. And, you know, at that time, if people asked her, whoa, like, the ring of Erith Akbi, that sounds sick. What's that? If Le Guin was Tolkien, she would have said, oh, I'm so glad you asked, you know, and pulled out her notes. The answer was, I don't know. It just sounded cool. And that's so fabulous because on the page, I can report as a reader, you know, I read that book when I was young and have read it many times since. On the page, it is freaking dynamite. And it doesn't matter that it wasn't written down in some stack of notes somewhere. All that matters is that it's there on the page. You encounter it as a reader. You go, wow, cool. And then you keep going with the story.
So that split between the implicit and explicit and this type of, you know, kind of curriculum, the reading list would kind of be how the course starts. And then for people that want to learn how to write this way, is there any kind of early writing prescription you would recommend, writing tools or ideas for how? I'm a nonfiction writer, as an example. I've never written fiction. I'm just looking for a way in here.
Yeah. You know, I actually think, you know, I'd probably have to think about that some more, and maybe I could come up with a better, you know, better kind of exercise sequence. But my instinct is to say that it's the same as the preparation for any kind of fiction writing, which is that you do just have to do it. I actually think, again, it's maybe paradoxical. I think, you know, if somebody said, I want to learn how to create captivating worlds, other worlds in my fiction, and, you know, particularly if they had in mind a Game of Thrones or the Lord of the Rings, whatever, my assignment to them would be to write something, and I'm not kidding here. I would say, I want you to write something 4 paragraphs long. It's going to be a story or something. It's going to produce an effect. It's going to be captivating and readable, and it's going to create a whole world. It's going to conjure it, and I'm going to be in that. I'm going to go say, wow, so cool. And you get 1 page. And because I think that's really, really important, to be able to do that and create that sense of otherness and of richness and of like the great vista with just, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 strokes of the metaphorical, you know, brush of fiction. I think that's the key.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And because you can always build out from there. Yeah. But I guess I would go so far as to say that if you can't do that and do that well, then your large scale attempt is gonna be a problem.
Right. Okay. That's a great homework assignment for anyone listening. Because it's small, and it also makes it much more intellectually manageable. It might not be easy.
That's important, right? Yeah. That's about, yeah. I mean, this is my thing. This is about my thing about writing. I actually think any kind of writing, of course, I know fiction best, but I think it applies across the board. I think the most important thing anybody can do, especially as they're learning and getting better, is finish things. To have a draft that is kind of half done or trails off or is constantly in that state of like, oh yeah, I've been working on that for a while. Mm-hmm. It's better than nothing, maybe. But it's fundamentally not useful because you can never show it to someone and say like, tell me what you think, because it's always like, well, yeah, it's not finished, or like, oh no, it's not actually a whole thing, or like, oh, I'm going to change that. No, it's got to be finished, and it's got to be something that you yourself or other people can actually evaluate. And the beautiful thing is that it is possible, totally possible, and quite fun to evaluate a story that is 4 paragraphs long, or 2 pages long, or 3,000 words long. And that's how you get better. That's it. You write things, you get an idea, you start it, you draft it, you revise it, you finish it. Yeah. Most important.
No, and
you get feedback.
Most difficult. Yeah.
And then you go again and again and again. And that's it.
I really appreciate and like that. When I was running a blog that published every night, sometimes they were good, sometimes they were bad, but there are other books I've been working on for years, and the giant Scrivener files are just like sitting there as 75,000 words about something. And it's like, I'm not even done chapter 2. Like, it's problematic for many reasons, but yeah, I can relate to the idea of wanting to finish it or ship it, as Seth Godin might say.
Yeah.
In chapter 3 of our show. Okay, now more conversation potentially about writing, but let's use your third formative book as a way in, and that would be The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper, Cooper.
I've got my copy here too.
Oh, look at that. Oh, look, they're identical.
Yeah, they're, well, one of them's a little more loved. Yeah. This is the copy I read when I was like 10 or 11 years old.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Published in 1973 by Chatto and Windus over in the UK, the cover shows a drawing of a young boy in a long cape riding a black stallion with its front legs high in the air above a second boy in a red sweater sitting, maybe tossed or fallen, in front of a brightly lit open door with black birds flying all around. Pasted across the top is the title, The Dark is Rising, in navy blue calligraphy with Susan Cooper in a white all caps sans serif below. On top of the book, there's a ribbon saying a Newbery Honor Book, and below, The Dark is Rising sequence. Susan Cooper, born in 1935, I believe alive today, age 90.
I believe so, yeah.
Went to Oxford, where she was the first ever female editor of the school paper, and then went to be a reporter for London's Sunday Times. She wrote her first book, Oversea Under Stone, for a publishing house competition, and it became the first book in the 5-book Darkness is Rising series. This would be the second. What's the book about? 11-year-old Will Sten discovers he is the last of the Old Ones, immortal beings dedicated to defending the world against dark forces. As the newest and youngest Old One, Will must undertake a quest to find 6 magical signs that together can ward off the rising power of the dark. File this one, Dewey Decimal Answers are 823.914 for literature/English and old literature/English fiction. Robin, tell us about your relationship with The Dark is Rising.
This is another young read. It's interesting that two out of my 3 here are young reads, and I do think there's a reason for that. I wish this wasn't the case, but I do pretty strongly believe that no book can hit you as hard as a book you read when you're like between the ages of 10 and maybe 20.
100%.
It's just your brain is different. Your neurons are all squishy, and the impressions, they really stick. And I've got a whole list of books I read in those years that still continue just to mean so much to me. This one is good in a lot of ways. When I think of it, one of the distinctions, compared to maybe some of the others that are favorites, is that, I can sort of recount the story. I know what happens and what the situation, the scenario is. Although it kind of gets fuzzed out. There's more books in the series, and I'm like, then they go to find a guy with a sword. I don't know. What I can recall and kind of line up with just like perfect precision is the images. And they are as like perfect and evocative and deep as like, the classic freaking Rider-Waite tarot card deck, where you look at each card and you're like, I don't know, but this is doing something in my brain. It just is this pileup of these like culturally resonant images. Susan Cooper, just a terrific writer of prose. She's one of the people, I would say, like Ursula K. Le Guin, who just writes a wonderful, clear sentence so that kind of the prose becomes this transparent, glass holding the story and the content and the images. But then her images, and I would say this is more so than many others, including even Le Guin, which is really saying something. Her images are just perfect. I always want to use the word delicious, I think, as if it's like a bag of chips, and you're like, give me another chip. You use the word umami a lot. I do. For some reason, the taste, the taste of these things really, that seems like the right analogy to me for some reason.
I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, I could go through them, and it's like a red-haired rider pounding down this dark village lane, between dark pines on a winter's day. A bright English country house, totally snowed in, but inside it's bright and warm, and all these siblings are kind of running around and harassing each other while the parents are cooking in the kitchen. There's this, you could call it the MacGuffin, except I think they actually are important, to the story and the world. There's this set of signs that our protagonist, young Will, has to assemble, and they're these like, sort of like proto crosses, and so he can thread them on his belt, like it was like Batman, this sort of weird like pagan utility belt. And over the course of the book, he's given the quest. He's got to find them. It's very important to like the cosmos. And he does in all these different situations, but they represent the elements. You know, there's one for iron, and there's one for stone, there's one for water, there's one for wood, and a couple more. And it just is like, I don't know, those are like, it's like Susan Cooper just so clearly could see the keyboard in front of her. I don't mean the computer keyboard or the typewriter keyboard. I mean like the piano keyboard, and the keys are like myth. We've been talking about myth a lot. It's myth and it's legend and it's, you know, vibe. And it's just all ghosts and castles and swords and King Arthur, and just, I mean, everybody kind of plays, not everybody, but a lot of people play that keyboard. I don't think everybody sees it clearly and or plays it like with that virtuoso command. And Susan Cooper does and did. It's awesome.
Absolutely. It is awesome. There's a really famous quote from this book. It's the most popular quote when you look online. Every man has a last choice after the first, a chance of forgiveness. Turn, period. Come to the light. I was just struck by the concept of light. You know, in life, you actually use that. You used light in a couple of the images you just cast for us. And I know it's a trope across many stories, but I just wondered what light looks like to you in life, or more broadly to you, what are the elements of a good life? Yeah.
Well, those are kind of two different questions. The light I actually think is profound in the context of this conversation, talking about books, readers, libraries, bookstores, because reading is, among many other things, reading is the empire of light. You know, I think it's hard if you just imagine some weird alternate history where, I don't know, maybe human culture got real weird and everybody around the whole world decided there's no artificial light. That's not, we don't do that. And so there were no candles, no lanterns, no lamps, no LED bulbs, no phones, you know, that could like make their own light, none of that stuff. In that world, I actually think it's kind of hard to imagine fiction being an important medium. I think it's so crucial to reading that we have these bubbles of light, and they can be private and they can be quiet and they can, you know, be at night and all this other kind of stuff. I don't think the sun is enough to enjoy books and comic books and newspapers. And so I have often thought of reading as being kind of like, it kind of has traveled with light and with humankind's mastery and kind of command of light. And so I'm very grateful for all the ways we make light, you know, the can, you know, it doesn't have to be freaking high tech stuff. It can be as simple as the candle. But it's good stuff. And I think readers ought to recognize the debt they owe to, you know, all the ways we make and manage light.
You even said in your very first ever newsletter in 2020, what is a book? I'm fond of Craig Maud's argument that what makes a book is its edges, to which I will add a book requires collimation.
Yeah. The collimation of light.
The idea is light is said to be collimated when all of its photons are pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's reading is, I wrote that down. Reading is the empire of light.
Empire of light. Yeah.
The next question is, you know, to you, because I've heard you talk a lot about animals and birds and nature and fear a lot. But you've also described yourself as techno hyphen lots of different words at the end of that.
I have.
You know, you got an Apple Watch on, I think, right now.
Yeah, I do.
You've got a headphones plugged in. I think your shirt says.
Yeah, this is my homage to the. Here, I'll back up so you can see. This is wonderful. One of my favorite T-shirts is actually printed by the writer and musician Claire Evans, and it's she made the ENIAC 6, the original computer programmers, look kind of like a punk rock band, and I love it.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a great shirt. So you got a really, you know, you've tilted heavily into the technological world. You're writing, you know, thousands of words long essays about the ethics and morals of AI. Yeah. And you also speak very confidently through your books and as I watch you online about like how, you know, nothing that we create through computers will ever match like the flight of a hummingbird and so on. Yeah. So you're physically making olive oil, you know. What are the elements of a good life to you? Yeah. You know, I always enjoy kind of recognizing some of those
what seem like contradictions, right? Sort of like, well, hey, well, which one is it? And I remember it always makes me think back a little bit to when I first published Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. And, because that's a novel very much about the interplay between old technology, books and printing. And there's a lot in it. If you don't know it already, you learn a lot about the deep history of books and typography.
Yeah, it's great.
But there's also a ton of technology, and you can, my clear interest in, data visualization and programming and, ebooks and all that kind of stuff is very apparent on the page as well. So people would often, to be kind of clever, or kind of, provocative in a interview or something, would ask, well, okay, well, which is it, Robin? Do you print books or ebooks? The paper or the internet? And I just always had to say, like, there's no decision. Or rather, I choose all of it. I'll take yes, please. I'll take one of each. And I actually think it's really important to insist that there is no contradiction, there is no dichotomy. We are human beings, the world and all these interesting things are there for us to explore and enjoy, and evaluate. By the way, it doesn't mean that it's all good or all healthy. But I guess this has been true ever since I was a kid. The same period of time that I was vibing out on the Book of Greek Myths and, reading The Dark is Rising, we had a early Macintosh computer down in our basement. It was a Mac Plus. And I would go down there and I would use that Mac Plus and I would like draw little pixel figures and I would write stuff and print it out, and make weird little books. And I saw as a naive child, I saw no contradiction there.
No.
It just seemed like it was a bunch of cool stuff for me to explore. And I guess that's how I still feel. Nobody can get me to choose because it's just all interesting.
Yeah, a bunch of cool stuff for me to explore. It's all interesting.
Doesn't that sound, by the way, I often, very often I feel very grateful to both my parents, of course, for just creating the space and the life, that made that possible, but also to that community. It was a cool place to grow up. It was, safe and interesting, and there was kind of enough to do, and there was a great public library.
Yeah.
And there was the library in my school, and that I had that feeling is really not something to be taken for granted.
No, absolutely not. It's what affords us the ability to be able to play with these curiosities, and it has been the fertile ground for your massive mind, which we're enjoying the fruits of through your books and your blogs and your zines and your olive oil. So to close things off, I got just a few fast money round questions here. Let's wrap things up. I will avoid the hardcover, paperback, audio, or question because we kind of covered it at the beginning. I know where you stand on that.
I could only pass on that one.
But how do you organize your books on your bookshelf?
Yeah, if my camera here was mobile, I could show you because I've got huge shelves on both sides of the room here.
What room are you in? Most people are listening to this. They won't be able to see, but I see so much happening in this room.
It's a mess. Studio? Yeah, that's very. You're very diplomatic. I'll do the description. Robin stands in a room that seems to be cluttered with a strange assortment of machinery, stacks of papers, weird bibliographic detritus, and on the back wall, a neon sign, currently dark, that is the neon sign from the pages of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. This is my office, which I call the media lab. And it's really cruddy. But in a way, I've become sort of proud of the fact that it's like not for show. I feel like I have sometimes seen other people's creative offices in person or maybe, in the background of a video. And they're so nice. I mean, they're beautiful and all the surfaces are clean and everything. And I'm like, I don't know if you do any real work there. I don't know if that's really where the magic happens.
You've heard the Albert Einstein quote, probably. If a cluttered desk is the sign of a cluttered mind, then please tell me what the sign of an empty desk is. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So anyways, that's where I am. But yeah. So
how do you organize the books?
Yeah, you can see the shelves.
I love that phrase, bibliographic detritus.
Yeah, detritus. I do a rough chop. I do believe in thematic shelving. Basic subjects. So I've got a science fiction shelf. I've got a kind of nature and ecology shelf. I've got a hard, weird science shelf. I've got actually the shelf that's been most active lately because of the printing is kind of the book history graphic design shelf. And those kind of, those grow and sometimes will take over part of another shelf. Within that space, it is pure chaos. It is random. It is just books. I cannot manage a alphabetical or, Library of Congress system. But it is, it used to be even, believe it or not, it used to be even more of a mess. And I found it was, with the number of books I have, it was getting hard to, when I would think of something, I'd be like, I want to see that book. And then that would turn into like an afternoon project to find the book. And I was like, this is not going to work. This has got to be this collection of books. If I'm going to have this many books, it's got to actually be a tool that works for me. So I've gotten much better actually about kind of keeping books in the right place. And yeah.
Perfect.
I'm
Sounds like it really works.
Yeah.
What is your book lending policy?
Oh, yeah. I actually am a bit of a, what would you call it? And I'm extreme on this end, and I don't think it's going to be what you expect. I think that if you lend a book or borrow a book, the expectation should actually be that it's never coming back. I just think it's like, and you know what? If it is that precious and you're like, no, this needs to come back, I do not think you should be lending it. I think the healthy, generous modality is, either I just give someone a book and say, yeah, keep it, enjoy it. Or I say, you can bring it back if you want, but this is not a lending library. We are in full circulation mode here.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Does a book come to mind that you wish you could read again for the first time?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question. Interesting sometimes to just note literally the first thing that leaps to mind. And I will say the book Hild by Nicola Griffith, which is kind of almost fits in actually to The Dark is Rising in terms of Hild, Hild.
Oh, okay.
It came out a few years ago, and it's big. It's a fat book. It probably is 600 pages. It's historical fiction. It's set in England in like can't remember if it's like the 800s or 900s. It's really quite a remote, bit of English medieval history.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those books. I truly believe you have to read it either in wintertime or during a rainstorm or something. You need to be home and cozy for like a period of time so that you can just dive into this book and like not come out until it's over. It's so completely 360, like you are in this world. It's full of detail. The voices are great. The characters are great. And I'm sure I could read it again and I probably ought to, and it'd be a good time. But I remember so vividly that first time reading it and just as cozy and comfortable as like a big blanket. You just were like, I'm just so happy to be here. And that's a great feeling for a book to achieve.
Hild, okay, I'll check that out.
That's great.
I didn't ask you about your writing process per se.
Yeah.
But with how much stuff you're doing, do you have a set practice or a set day and time or way you write, or is
I don't do a day and time. It's interesting the way it's kind of connects to the manufacturing and the olive oil and some other things too. My year has become really seasonal. Was not always the case. Back years and years ago, I worked in an office and, the rhythm was kind of more weekly, like many people, I think. Now it's very seasonal, in the sense that there is this period of the year, really about 3 months in the fall and winter when, that is not a time for writing. There is not a spare minute for me to sit down and, work on chapter 7 of my manuscript of whatever it is, because it is the olive harvest and it waits for no one and you got to do it all then. And rather than that feeling like a burden or like a problem, it has actually felt really clarifying and liberating, because you're like, oh, good, I know exactly what I need to be doing. There's no question, and I kind of don't have a choice in the matter. But then, as kind of the complement to that, I have discovered that there can be other times of year that are almost like the season for writing, or the season for zine printing, and so kind of making the modularity less about hours of the day or even days of the week, and more about like weeks and months of the year. It's been a change for me, but it's been one that's been just really, really, energizing and has felt really productive.
I mean, we both publish on the lunar calendar. Part of what relieves me about the lunar calendar is just the hint back to time being measured in circles as opposed to lines. It just feels so much more relaxing.
And it's not up to you. I mean, the part of it is like, hey, I didn't make it up. It's the the world is telling me that now is the time. It's great.
I like that. Yeah. I like that as a challenge for all of us, which is how can we tap back into natural cycles in our lives?
Yeah.
A bit more.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite bookstore, living or dead?
Yeah, I do. It's a bit sentimental, but the sentiment is powerful. So it's like the freaking warp core, in the Enterprise. Green Apple Books. They have 2 locations in San Francisco. I still go there all the time. They've been great allies to my novels and to me, just in a really meaningful way. And back actually around the time this kind of comes full circle, because we were talking about years ago when I first decided maybe I could call myself a writer in public. At that time, I was living in a neighborhood in San Francisco called the Richmond, and my apartment was just around the corner, just like 2 blocks up and 1 block over from the largest Green Apple Books on Clement Street there in San Francisco. Amazing bookstore, big, weird, shadowy. And open till 10 p.m., which for San Francisco is like kind of late, actually. That's really luxurious. And so I would go there at that time, and it's usually kind of toward closing time, and I would kind of just wander in, and I would always look at the new books, particularly the paperbacks. As we discussed, I really like those paperbacks, and I would just see what was new, and I'd see the little bookseller notes describing, how great these books were, and I would look at the titles, I would look at the author names. And I mean, honestly, I would just like dream of being there on that shelf, and I would say, "Oh man, that'd be so cool." I want that to be me. I want that to be something that I made. And I did that a lot. I think I probably, I don't know, maybe some bookseller there was like worried about me. They're like, "Oh, is that guy okay?" But it just was a very meaningful place to go and kind of see the goal. And frankly, of course, I bought books and I read them and I loved them, and it was really just an inspiring destination. The paperback table at Green Apple Books.
It turned into a vision that you manifested.
Yeah, that's true. And my books had been on that exact paperback table, so that it just means a lot to me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Robin, so much for your time, for your thought, for your energy. The very last question I have written down my page is the one I always close with, which is, if this is a show with a lot of writers, book lovers. I know writer is just the first of kind of 3 words now in your bio, but if you could give one last hard-fought piece of advice to those out there who are aspiring to write, is there one thing that would come to mind that you would share with us to help close off this conversation?
Yeah, I would say that, in some respects, storytelling across different media is kind of the same, right? You can imagine certain principles or approaches being broadly useful. I think fiction has at least one really important and liberatory difference, which is that the only thing a work of fiction has to do, and it is mandatory, it has to do this one thing, but the only thing it has to do is just make you want to keep reading, and make you want to read to the next page.
Yeah.
And what's awesome is that there are an infinite number of ways to do that. I mean, you can read, obviously, and I'm sure you've had many of these conversations on the show. Lots of people will tell you how to do it, and they'll say, "Oh, you got to make your story work this way, or you got to like sequence it out like this, or you got to create this sense of conflict, or you got to create these kind of images, all that kind of stuff." All true. However, you can also not do any of those things. Anything, like, this is so true. Anything can work as long as it works. I mean, there's examples of truly the most unbelievable books. Like, I think Nicholson Baker actually is a great example for kind of the outer limits of like, that's a novel. Like, it'll be literally, he's written novels that like take place in someone's thought process for the like 45 seconds they're on an escalator, and they're captivating because there's a version of that story in that book that is really, really boring and maybe unreadable, but Nicholson Baker made it work because the voice on the page is wonderful and smart and funny and interesting. And anyway, I just think that anybody who wants to write and wants to, maybe get published by a publisher, large or small, ought to really take that to heart. That like, it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it does mean that like anything you imagine, any approach, any structure, any voice can work. And like, what an exciting thing. It's like staring out at like a huge cosmos of stars and planets. And you're like, yeah, you could go to any one. Just choose. And then, put in the work to actually make it good.
Absolutely. I love your books, Robin. I find them dizzying was a word used earlier, vertiginous. They really are seductive. They're challenging. I find my mind being very stretched by them. And it's fun talking to you because you go very fast. Your brain is like going a mile a minute, and you have really big thoughts. And thank you for kind of stepping down to the level of this show, talking about your formative book, the childhood books. It's been a really inspiring and engaging conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your kind invitation. It's great to be here.
Hey everybody, it's just me, just Neil again, hanging out in my basement, listening with all of you from around the world to the wise, brilliant, and wonderful Robin Sloan. Oh my gosh, that guy thinks so fast and he moves so quickly. I don't know if you could hear my brain like trying to catch up with him the whole time. So many quotes jumped out to me in that conversation. Hard to pick favorites, but I'll choose a few. On the ethics of AI, I liked what Robin said. I think if a person feels like they want to be in the world that cares, it's really important to hold the line and take that responsibility seriously. I feel so puzzled and confused by what's going on with AI. I just read this book, Empire of AI, which you would know if you get my book club. If you don't, go to neil.blog. You can sign up for my book club. And it's by Karen Howe, H-A-O. And it really opened my eyes to the negative sides of AI, not just the environmental stuff. I mean, they're building data centers now that are the size of Manhattan that you can't live within 20 miles of because they're buzzing all day. And by the way, they only run on distilled water. So they also need like huge purified water plants near them. It's not just the environmental stuff. It's not just the human impact. Like there's people in a lot of developing countries, which she calls the global south in the book, that are doing a lot of the sort of harder jobs, like assessing whether content is like, sexual assault or not. And they have to look at it to help the AI learn what's appropriate or not. But then people are getting traumatized. It's also just the sort of unethical way that the industry started. And yet simultaneously, even though my eyes are open to all that, here I am using, Claude and ChatGPT and Grok and Gemini and all these new software pieces because I'm like, oh, this could be a quick, easy way to like find a 6-minute baby bok choy recipe. Like I have 6 minutes to make it. And rather than looking on Google. So I find myself both using it and also not liking it, but I'm trying to figure out where I land on that. Robin's wonderful essay on AI on his website, we will point to in the show notes, by the way. If you go to 3books.co, you can always click every chapter. We have a full notes and summary of everything we discussed. The essay is called, I believe, Is It Okay? And it's just a wonderful take on whether or not it's ethically appropriate what we're doing with AI right now. That doesn't mean it will stop, but it's just a really nice way to sort of see some of the ethical sides of this thing. All right, that was just one quote. I kind of went on a big rant there. And then how about this one? I think that if you lend a book or borrow a book, the expectation should be that it's never coming back. I just like that as a principle. We had a babysitter over at our house last night. Leslie and I got our weekly date night. It's not always weekly, but we call it a weekly date night so that we try to always put it in because even if we don't feel like it, even if we're too tired, and if we don't think we have the time, when we go on a date, just the two of us, of course, it infuses the energy of our total system, our total family system, with what's needed in order to make a busy life with 4 boys run and hum. And anyway, as we said goodnight to our babysitter, I noticed on my bookshelf, I have this like mass market paperback shelf. I noticed there's like this metal rail in the top of my ceiling. And I started realizing that only mass market paperbacks can sit on that rail because like something like 4/5 of the book sits on them and like 1/5 sits off them. So if I was to hit them, they would fall off, but every other book would completely fall off. And I looked up there and I said, oh, Lisa, we've got 2 copies of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And she's like, oh, great. I've never read that book. I've always wanted to read it. I said, oh, great. You can have it. Yes, I had 2 copies specifically to give away. And by the way, Zen the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was, of course, chosen by Robin Dunbar in chapter 132 as one of his 3 most formative books. So I gave her the book. I never need to see it again. Even if I had 1 copy, would I give it away? I'm not sure. But point is, Robin's point stands. All right. Now another quote. I think this one is good for writers. You know, whenever we have a novelist on the show, as we've had with David Mitchell, as we had with Mohsen Muhammad and George Saunders in chapter 75, I really do want to try to get some writing craft tips. And the tip that we got on the writing from Robin is the only thing a work of fiction has to do, and it is mandatory, is just make you want to keep reading. 3 quotes from the wise and wonderful Robin Sloan, who adds 3 more books to our top 1,000, including number 558, D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths by Ingri and Edgar D'Aulaire. Number 557, Player of Games by Iain Banks, Banks. Note that Iain is spelled Iain. And then number 556, The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper. 3 more books that will be added to our top 1,000. If you want to read the top 1,000, i.e. a list of every single formative book mentioned on the show, just go to 3books.co/ you guessed it, the top 1,000, and they are there. We are getting close to 500 now. We are getting close to 500 now. That will be halfway down our list. But of course, the pace slowed because from 2018 to like 2023, we were releasing a new chapter every new moon and full moon. Now we're just releasing a chapter every full moon to help preserve my sanity as I try to read all these books and interview all these people. And of course, we aren't abandoning new moons. We're just dropping classic chapters on them. Most recently, of course, the classic chapter was with Blue Jays announcer Jerry Howard, and the next classic chapter will be coming out from Robin the bartender. Mixing, big names, small names, interesting, always trying to go for interesting. Thank you to you. Thank you to Robin. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure, and I really appreciate your time.